His face was turning blue. Dominic Valentino, the most feared man in Chicago, a king who made judges disappear and controlled half the city's underworld, was on his knees, clawing at his chest, gasping for air that wouldn't come. "Please," he choked, grabbing the waitress's arm with fingers that had signed death warrants. "Help me. I can't find my inhaler. I can't." He was dying. Right there, on the marble floor of his own restaurant, surrounded by armed men who could kill anyone in this room, but couldn't save him. And then she did something no one expected. The black waitress, the one everyone had ignored for 6 months, the one who kept her head down and her eyes low, stepped forward. Not to call for help. Not to run. She dropped to her knees beside the most dangerous man in the city, loosened his tie, and took control of the room with 3 words. "Everyone, get out." His guards drew their weapons. She didn't flinch. What she did next would start a war, expose a 20-year-old murder, and force her to confront a secret about her own father that would shatter everything she believed. But here's what she didn't know. What nobody in that room knew. Someone was watching. Someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. And the man whose life she just saved? He might be the same man who killed her father. Have you ever saved someone's life, only to discover they destroyed yours? Stick around. Because this story is about to take a turn you won't see coming. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you are hooked in and ready to enjoy the story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments section where you are watching from, because tomorrow I'll be giving you an interesting story such as this one and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The ambulance sirens had faded into the Chicago night 3 hours ago, but Naomi's hands still trembled as she sat in the back office of La Dolce Vita, a cold cup of coffee growing stale between her palms. She had saved his life. The paramedics had confirmed it when they arrived. Another few minutes without intervention, and Dominic Valentino would have suffered a fatal respiratory arrest. Her quick thinking, her calm under pressure, her decision to position him correctly and keep his airway as clear as possible until they found a spare inhaler in his car. All of it had bought him the precious time he needed. And now she was terrified. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Maria stood in the doorway, her face a mask of barely contained fury. "You gave orders to his men." "His men?" "Naomi. You touched him. I saved his life. You inserted yourself into a business that is none of your concern." Maria stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. People who get close to the Valentino family have a way of disappearing. Is that what you want? To end up at the bottom of Lake Michigan because you wanted to play hero? Naomi set down the coffee cup with deliberate calm, though her insides churned with anxiety. "I'm a human being who saw another human being dying. What was I supposed to do? Let him suffocate on the floor while I refilled water glasses?" Maria opened her mouth to respond, but the sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway silenced her. One of Dominic's guards, the larger one with the scar across his left eyebrow, appeared in the doorway. His presence seemed to suck all the oxygen from the small room. "Miss Carter." His voice was gravel wrapped in silk. "Mr. Valentino would like to see you." It wasn't a request. The private hospital room smelled of antiseptic and expensive flowers. Dozens of arrangements covering every available surface, tokens of respect and fear from associates who had heard about the incident. Armed men stood at intervals along the corridor, and Naomi had been searched twice before being allowed entry. Dominic sat propped up against crisp white pillows, oxygen tubes trailing from his nose. Without his impeccable suit and commanding posture, he looked almost ordinary. Human. The silver in his hair caught the fluorescent light, and the lines around his eyes spoke of decades of burden she couldn't imagine. But his eyes, those dark, penetrating eyes, were exactly as she remembered. They fixed on her the moment she entered, and she felt the weight of his attention like a physical force. "Leave us," he said to the guards flanking his bed. "Sir, we can't." "I said leave us." The command broke no argument. The men exchanged glances but retreated, closing the door behind them with a soft click. Silence stretched between them, thick and charged. "They tell me I should be dead," Dominic finally said. His voice was rough, weakened by the night's ordeal, but it still carried an undercurrent of power. "They tell me that a waitress, a woman who has worked at my restaurant for 6 months without ever once looking me in the eye, took control of a room full of my people and saved my life." Naomi remained standing near the door, her spine straight, her expression carefully neutral. "I did what anyone would have done." "No." The single word cut through the air. "That is precisely what you did not do. Anyone else would have frozen. Anyone else would have deferred to my guards, waited for someone more important to take charge. You commanded a room full of killers without hesitation." A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "My men are still talking about it. Half of them are terrified of you." Despite herself, Naomi felt the corner of her mouth twitch. "Good. Maybe they'll learn some manners." Dominic's smile widened fractionally, and she caught a glimpse of what he might have been before the weight of his empire had calcified around him. "You have fire, Miss Carter. That is rare." He gestured to the chair beside his bed. "Please. Sit." She hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to maintain distance. But something in his eyes— vulnerability? Curiosity? Loneliness? Made her move forward and lower herself into the chair. "I want to know who you are," Dominic said. "Not the name on your employee file. Not the carefully constructed mask you wear at work. I want to know who Naomi Carter really is." "With respect, Mr. Valentino, that's none of your business. You saved my life. That makes it my business." He tilted his head, studying her with unsettling intensity. "You have training. Medical training. The way you positioned me, the way you monitored my breathing, that wasn't instinct. That was education." Naomi's jaw tightened. 3 years of nursing school. "I had to drop out." "Why?" The question was simple, but it cracked open something she had kept carefully sealed. She thought of her mother, Gloria, who had spent 30 years cleaning houses for wealthy white families, whose hands were rough as sandpaper and whose back had finally given out 2 years ago. She thought of Marcus, now 23 and working construction, sending half his paycheck home to help with bills he shouldn't have to worry about. She thought of the letter from the university, regretfully informing her that her scholarship had been revoked due to her leave of absence. "Life," she finally said. "Life is why." Dominic nodded slowly, as if her non-answer had told him everything he needed to know. "My mother cleaned houses too," he said quietly. "In Napoli, before we came to America. She used to say that the world is divided into 2 types of people, those who clean up messes and those who make them." His eyes grew distant. "She prayed every day that I would be the first kind." "And which kind are you?" The question hung between them, bold and dangerous. Most people wouldn't dare ask Dominic Valentino such a thing. But Naomi had already saved his life. She figured she had earned the right to a little audacity. "Both," he admitted. "I am both." In the weeks that followed, Naomi tried to return to her normal life. She worked her shifts, visited her mother, picked up extra hours to chip away at the mountain of debt that seemed to grow faster than she could climb. But normalcy had become impossible. First came the envelope. Thick, cream-colored, no return address. Inside, she found a check for $50,000 and a handwritten note. For your mother's care. Please do not refuse. D.V. She refused. She marched into La Dolce Vita on her day off, demanded to see the manager, and sent the check back with a message of her own. I don't take payment for being a decent human being. 2 days later, another envelope arrived. This one contained documentation showing that her mother's medical debt had been paid in full, all $127,000 of it, by an anonymous benefactor. The note simply read, "Not payment. Gratitude." There is a difference. Naomi should have been furious. She should have felt manipulated, controlled, purchased. Instead, she sat on her mother's worn couch and wept great, heaving sobs that had been building for 2 years. Gloria held her daughter's hand and asked no questions, her wise eyes understanding more than Naomi would ever say aloud. The third envelope changed everything. It arrived at the end of the month, and instead of money, it contained a single sheet of paper. A job offer. Private nurse and medical consultant to the Valentino household. Salary. $200,000 per year. Full benefits. Flexible hours to accommodate completion of her nursing degree. All tuition paid. And at the bottom, a handwritten addition. I find myself in need of someone who is not afraid to give me orders. The position is yours if you want it. D.V. You're out of your mind, Marcus said, pacing the small living room of their childhood home. This man is a criminal, Naomi. A murderer. You can't seriously be considering. He's never been convicted of anything. Because he owns half the judges in this city. Marcus spun to face her, fear and anger warring in his features. This isn't some fairy tale where the good girl reforms the bad boy. This is real life. These people are dangerous. I know exactly who they are, Naomi said quietly. I've spent 6 months watching them, Marcus. I've seen the guns, heard the whispers, watched people flinch when that man walks into a room. She met her brother's eyes. But I've also seen him donate millions to children's hospitals without ever putting his name on the building. I've seen him personally ensure that the families of his employees are cared for when tragedy strikes. I've seen him sit alone in that restaurant, night after night, with a sadness in his eyes that no amount of money or power can touch. So what? You think you can save him too? The question stung because it struck too close to the truth. Naomi had always been the one who stayed. When friends gave up, when situations grew difficult, when everyone else walked away. It was her greatest strength and her most dangerous weakness. I think, she said slowly, that this is an opportunity one cannot afford to refuse. Mama's debt is gone. I could finish my degree. I could actually build something instead of just surviving. She paused. And maybe I'm curious. Curious about what? How quickly can you get yourself killed? Curious about who Dominic Valentino really is. Beyond the rumors. Beyond the fear. She took her brother's hands in hers, feeling the calluses that matched their mother's. I've spent my whole life being careful, Marcus. Being invisible. Keeping my head down and hoping that if I just worked hard enough, good things would eventually happen. Her voice hardened with resolve. I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of being afraid. For once in my life, I want to step into the unknown and see where it leads. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then pulled her into a fierce embrace. If anything happens to you, he murmured against her hair. "I will burn that man's empire to the ground. You understand me?" Naomi laughed despite herself, tears pricking at her eyes. "I understand." She accepted the position. What Naomi didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that her decision had been watched from the shadows by people who had been searching for a way into the Valentino inner circle for years. People who knew secrets about her own family that she had never been told. And in a cramped apartment across the city, a man with cold blue eyes and a folder full of photographs smiled as he made a phone call. "She's in," he said. "Phase 1 is complete." The voice on the other end of the line was ice-wrapped in velvet. "Good. Remember, she cannot know the truth about her father. Not yet. If Valentino discovers who she really is before we're ready." A pause. "Well, let's ensure that doesn't happen." The line went dead. And Naomi Carter, daughter of a man she had never met, stepped unknowingly into a game that had been waiting for her since the day she was born. The Valentino estate sat on 12 acres of manicured grounds in Lake Forest, a fortress of old money and older secrets hidden behind iron gates and towering oak trees. On Naomi's first morning there, she stood at the entrance of her private quarters, a suite larger than her mother's entire house, and wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. "Miss Carter." A crisp British accent cut through her thoughts. She turned to find an elegant woman in her 60s, silver hair pulled into a severe bun, watching her with appraising eyes. "I am Mrs. Hargrove, head of household staff. Mr. Valentino has requested your presence in the East Wing medical suite. I will escort you." Naomi followed the woman through corridors lined with artwork that belonged in museums, past windows overlooking gardens that could have graced the pages of architectural magazines. Everything was beautiful, pristine, controlled, and underneath it all, she sensed a tension humming like a live wire. "How long have you worked for the family?" Naomi asked, trying to fill the silence. Mrs. Hargrove's pace didn't falter. 31 years. I began when Mr. Valentino was still a young man learning the business from his father." A pause. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" The older woman glanced over her shoulder, and for a moment, her professional mask slipped to reveal something almost like approval. "Someone who could be bought. Someone who would simper and flatter and forget their purpose." Her eyes returned forward. "You sent back $50,000. In this house, that makes you either very principled or very foolish. Can't I be both?" A ghost of a smile crossed Mrs. Hargrove's thin lips. "We shall see, Miss Carter. We shall see." The medical suite was state-of-the-art, better equipped than many small hospitals Naomi had trained in. Monitors, oxygen supplies, emergency medications, even a small surgical setup for minor procedures. Dominic had clearly invested heavily in his health, which made the severity of his asthma attack even more puzzling. She found him in the adjoining sitting room, dressed in casual slacks and a sweater that probably cost more than her car. Without his armor of tailored suits, he looked younger, more approachable, though his eyes still held that weight of authority that never quite faded. "Miss Carter." He rose to greet her, and she noticed his movements were still careful, measured. "I trust your accommodations are satisfactory?" "They're bigger than my first apartment, my second apartment, and my mother's house combined." She crossed her arms. "Which brings me to my first order as your medical consultant. We need to talk about your inhaler." Dominic's eyebrow arched. "Straight to business. I appreciate that. You had an attack at the restaurant because you couldn't find your inhaler. A man with your resources, your staff, your obsessive attention to detail." She gestured at the medical suite behind her, does not simply lose his inhaler. So either you've been neglecting your condition, or something else is going on. Which is it? For a long moment, Dominic simply stared at her. Then slowly he began to laugh, a genuine sound that transformed his face and stripped years from his features. 6 months, he said, shaking his head. You worked at my restaurant for 6 months, and I never once noticed you. How is that possible? I'm very good at being invisible. No. He stepped closer, and she caught his scent. Sandalwood and something darker, richer. You are very good at making people believe you are invisible. There is a profound difference. His eyes searched hers. To answer your question, I have been neglecting my condition. Intentionally. Naomi frowned. Why would you? Because I have been waiting to die, Miss Carter. The confession hung in the air between them, stark and terrible. Naomi felt the breath leave her lungs as she processed his words. My wife passed 3 years ago, Dominic continued, his voice flat, controlled. Ovarian cancer. She fought for 18 months, and I watched her fade piece by piece until there was nothing left but the shell of the woman I loved. He moved to the window, staring out at the grounds that suddenly seemed less like a paradise and more like a gilded cage. After her funeral, I found myself wondering what the point of all this was. The empire, the power, the money. None of it could save her. None of it could bring her back. So you stopped caring about your own health. I stopped caring about everything. He turned back to face her, and she saw the grief etched into every line of his face. I have a son, Marco. He is 28, eager to prove himself, desperate for my approval. I should be training him to take over, preparing him for leadership. Instead, I have been pushing him away, testing his patience, waiting for him to either rise to the occasion or fail spectacularly. A bitter smile. Father of the year, as they say. Naomi absorbed this information, her medical training warring with her human compassion. Mr. Valentino. Dominic. If you are going to lecture me about my death wish, you might as well use my first name. Dominic. She took a breath. I'm not going to lecture you. I'm going to tell you something my mother said to me when I wanted to quit nursing school after my father left. His attention sharpened. Your father left? When I was 12. One day he was there. The next, he was gone. No explanation, no goodbye, no forwarding address. She had long since buried the pain of that abandonment, but speaking of it now, in this room full of expensive equipment and empty purpose, brought it uncomfortably close to the surface. My mother sat me down and said, Baby girl, the world will give you 1,000 reasons to stop living. Your job is to find one reason to keep going. And what reason did you find? Naomi met his eyes without flinching. Her. My brother. The patients I would one day help. The life I hadn't built yet. She stepped toward him, closing the distance between them. You have a son who needs his father. You have employees whose families depend on you. You have, she hesitated, then pushed forward. You have a woman standing in front of you who just gave up her entire life to come work for a man she barely knows, because she saw something in him worth saving. Dominic's expression flickered. Surprise, gratitude, and something deeper that made her pulse quicken unexpectedly. You barely know me, he said softly. Then let me know you. Let me help you find a reason to keep going. She held out her hand. That's my job now, isn't it? To keep you alive. He stared at her outstretched hand for a long moment. Then slowly he took it. His palm was warm, his grip firm, and when his fingers closed around hers, Naomi felt something shift between them, a door opening to a room neither of them had planned to enter. "Very well, Miss Carter," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion he didn't try to hide. "You have yourself a patient." The first month passed in a blur of medical assessments, medication adjustments, and careful negotiations. Naomi established routines: morning breathing exercises, evening check-ins, weekly evaluations of his lung function. She insisted on accompanying him to business dinners, much to the confusion of his associates, who couldn't fathom why the most powerful man in Chicago needed a nurse shadowing his every move. "She's my insurance policy," Dominic told them with a smirk that made Naomi roll her eyes. Turns out staying alive is good for business. But it was during the quiet moments that their relationship truly began to form. Late nights in his study, where he told her about his childhood in Naples, about his father's brutal lessons in power, about the first man he ever killed and how the memory still haunted his dreams. Early mornings on the terrace, where she shared stories of her mother's resilience, her brother's loyalty, her own dreams of opening a clinic in underserved communities. They were two people from opposite worlds, connected by circumstance and held together by something neither was ready to name. And then Marco came home. He arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, roaring up the driveway in a red Ferrari that announced his presence long before he stepped out. Marco Valentino was everything his father was not: loud, brash, hungry for attention. At 28, he had his father's dark eyes but none of his restraint. His gaze swept over the estate like he was calculating its value, and when it landed on Naomi, she felt an immediate prickle of unease. "So you're the nurse," he said, looking her up and down with undisguised interest. "Dad's been talking about you. Didn't mention you were beautiful. Mr. Valentino." "Marco, please." He smiled, and it was charming in the way a snake's coiled body was graceful, compelling but dangerous. "I have to say, when I heard my father hired a personal nurse, I expected some old battle-axe with orthopedic shoes. This is a pleasant surprise. I'm here to do a job, Marco. Not to be a pleasant surprise." His smile widened. "Oh, I like you. Dad always did have good taste." Before Naomi could respond, Dominic appeared in the doorway. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as father and son regarded each other. "Marco, you're early. Traffic was light." Marco's casual tone didn't quite mask the tension in his shoulders. "Thought I'd come see how the old man is doing. Word on the street is you almost died last month. As you can see, I'm still here." "Yeah." Marco's eyes flicked to Naomi, then back to his father. "I can see that." The dinner that night was an exercise in barely concealed hostility. Marco dominated the conversation, boasting about deals he had closed, rivals he had intimidated, expansion plans he wanted to implement. Dominic listened in silence, his expression unreadable, offering neither praise nor criticism. Naomi watched the dynamic with growing concern. This was a family fractured by grief and expectation, two men orbiting each other like planets caught in competing gravities. Marco craved his father's approval. Dominic seemed incapable of giving it. After dinner, she found Marco in the garden, smoking a cigarette and staring at the stars. "Your father loves you," she said, joining him despite her better judgment. "He talks about you often." Marco laughed bitterly. "Does he? Let me guess. He talks about my failures, my impatience, how I'm not ready to take over. He talks about your potential, your ambition. He says you remind him of himself at your age." She paused. "He's afraid for you, Marco. Not of you. For you." Marco turned to look at her, and in the moonlight, she saw the boy beneath the bravado. Lonely, desperate, terrified of never being enough. You really believe that? I do. He studied her for a long moment, then flicked his cigarette into the darkness. You're different, Naomi. I don't know what your angle is yet, but you're different. He started to walk away, then paused. Be careful. This family destroys the things it loves. It's what we do. He vanished into the house, leaving Naomi alone with the weight of his warning and the growing suspicion that she had stumbled into something far more complicated than a simple job. That night, she couldn't sleep. She wandered the halls of the estate, trying to quiet her racing mind, when she heard voices coming from Dominic's study. The door was slightly ajar, and she knew she shouldn't listen, knew it was a violation of the trust they had been building. But the mention of her name stopped her cold. Carter woman is becoming a problem, an unfamiliar voice was saying. She has too much access, too much influence. She is not your concern, Vincent. Dominic's voice was ice. She is under my protection. With respect, boss. Do you even know who she is? We did a background check. Standard procedure. And we found something interesting. A rustling of papers. Then silence. Heavy. Dangerous silence. Her father, Vincent continued, was Jonathan Carter. Ring any bells? More silence. Then Dominic's voice, barely above a whisper. That's impossible. It's all there. Birth certificate, hospital records, the whole thing. She's his daughter, Dominic. She's the daughter of the man who... I know what he did. Dominic's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. I know exactly what Jonathan Carter did. Naomi's blood turned to ice. Her father, the man who had abandoned her family 20 years ago, was connected to Dominic? Connected to this world? What do you want to do? Vincent asked. If the Morellis find out who she is, the Morellis will find out nothing because you will tell no one about this. Do you understand me? The threat in Dominic's voice was unmistakable. This information stays between us. I will handle it. And the girl? A pause. Then, so quietly Naomi almost missed it. The girl changes nothing. But even as he said the words, Naomi heard the lie in them. Whatever her father had done, whatever connection he had to this world, it changed everything. And she was going to find out the truth. No matter what it cost her. Sleep became a stranger to Naomi in the days that followed. She moved through her duties with mechanical precision, checking Dominic's vitals, adjusting his medications, accompanying him to meetings where men with cold eyes discussed matters she pretended not to understand. But beneath her calm exterior, her mind raced with questions that demanded answers. Jonathan Carter. Her father. The ghost who had haunted her childhood with his absence. What had he done? How was he connected to Dominic Valentino? And why had the mere mention of his name turned the most powerful man in Chicago to stone? She began her investigation carefully, aware that one wrong move could expose her. Late at night, when the estate fell silent, she used the guest computer in the library to search public records, old newspaper archives, anything that might shed light on her father's past. What she found was maddeningly incomplete. A man who had worked as an accountant for various businesses in the 1990s, a marriage certificate to Gloria Williams dated 1994, and then, nothing. Jonathan Carter had simply ceased to exist in 2004, the year he vanished from her life. But it was what she couldn't find that troubled her most. No death certificate. No criminal records. No forwarding address or new identity that she could trace. Her father hadn't just left. He had been erased. "You're up late." Naomi's heart seized as she spun around. Dominic stood in the doorway of the library, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "I couldn't sleep," she managed, hoping he couldn't see the browser history from where he stood. "Sometimes I come here to read. Helps quiet my mind." He studied her for a moment. Too long, she thought, then moved into the room with the fluid grace of a predator. "What are you reading?" "Nothing important." She closed the laptop casually, praying her hands weren't shaking. "Just research for your treatment plan." "At 2 in the morning? I'm thorough." Another long pause. Then Dominic settled into the leather armchair across from her, swirling his whiskey with practiced ease. "You've been distracted lately. Distant. I've noticed. I didn't realize you paid such close attention to you." His eyes met hers, and she saw something flicker in their depths. Warmth, concern, and that ever-present intensity that made her feel both seen and exposed. "I pay very close attention, Naomi." Her name on his lips still felt like a small rebellion against the formality they had maintained. He had started using it 2 weeks ago, after a night when she had found him in the garden, staring at a photograph of his late wife with tears streaming silently down his face. She had sat beside him without speaking, and when dawn broke, he looked at her and said, "Thank you, Naomi." Just that. Nothing more. It had been enough. "I've been thinking about my father," she heard herself say. The words escaped before she could stop them, and she watched Dominic's expression carefully for any reaction. "He left when I was 12. I never knew why. My mother wouldn't talk about it." If her words affected him, he hid it masterfully. "That must have been difficult." "It was. It still is." She leaned forward slightly. "Do you know what it's like, Dominic? To have someone vanish from your life without explanation? To spend years wondering if you did something wrong, if you weren't enough, if maybe," her voice cracked despite herself, "if maybe they just didn't love you." Something shifted in his face. For a moment, she saw the mask slip. Guilt, perhaps, or recognition, before the walls came back up. "I know what it is to lose people," he said quietly. "And I know that the answers we seek are not always the answers we want." "What does that mean?" He rose from his chair, and for a terrifying moment, she thought he was going to confess everything. Instead, he paused beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body, smell the whiskey and sandalwood that had become so familiar. "It means that some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again." His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. The touch was electric, paralyzing. "Be careful which doors you choose to open, Naomi. Not all truths lead to peace." He left her alone in the library, her skin burning where his fingers had touched, her heart pounding with confusion and longing and fear. He knew. She was certain of it now. Dominic Valentino knew exactly what had happened to her father. And he was choosing not to tell her. The gala was Mako's idea. A charity event, he announced at breakfast 3 days later, his enthusiasm almost convincing. For the Children's Hospital. Great PR, excellent networking opportunity, and a chance to show Chicago that the Valentino family is more than just rumors and innuendo. Dominic regarded his son with the wary expression of a man waiting for the trap to spring. "Since when do you care about public relations?" Since I realize that our legitimate businesses suffer every time some journalist decides to write another exposé about alleged mob connections. Marco spread his hands. We control the narrative, Dad. We show them the philanthropists, the community leaders, the family men. It's smart strategy. Naomi watched the exchange from her seat at the table, noting the subtle desperation beneath Marco's confident pitch. He wanted his father's approval so badly it radiated from every pore. It's not a terrible idea, she offered, and both men turned to look at her. The hospital has been struggling for funding. A high-profile event could make a real difference. Marco's face lit up. Dominic's expression remained guarded, but she saw the flicker of something. Pride? Surprise? At her support. Very well, Dominic said finally. You may proceed with the planning. But I want to be involved in every decision. And Naomi. His eyes found hers. You will accompany me to the event. As my guest. The words hung in the air, loaded with implication. Marco's smile faltered almost imperceptibly before he recovered. Of course, he said smoothly. The more, the merrier. The weeks leading up to the gala became a whirlwind of preparations, and Naomi found herself drawn deeper into the Valentino world than she had ever intended. She attended planning meetings, offered opinions on catering and decorations, and watched as father and son navigated their complicated relationship through the safe medium of event logistics. But it was during the quiet moments that things began to shift. Dominic started finding excuses to be near her. A question about his medication that could have been asked over the phone. An invitation to join him for coffee on the terrace. A request for her opinion on a business matter that had nothing to do with his health. And Naomi, despite every warning bell screaming in her head, found herself leaning into his presence. Tell me about your wife, she said one evening, as they walked through the estate's rose garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air smelled of flowers and possibility. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Elena was light, he finally said. In a world full of darkness, she was the one bright thing I could hold on to. We met when I was 23, still believing I could be something other than what my father intended. She saw that version of me, the one who wanted to be good, and she never stopped believing in him, even when I did. She sounds remarkable. She was. His voice grew rough. When she died, I thought that version of me died with her. I thought there was nothing left but the monster my father created. Naomi stopped walking, forcing him to turn and face her. You're not a monster, Dominic. You don't know what I've done. I know who you are now. I know the man who pays for strangers' medical bills, who funds hospitals and schools without seeking credit, who sits alone in the dark, grieving a love he thinks he doesn't deserve to remember. She stepped closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. That's not a monster. That's a man who's forgotten how to forgive himself. Dominic stared at her, and she watched the battle play out across his features, the longing warring with guilt, the desire fighting the duty. Naomi, he breathed, and her name was a prayer on his lips. You should run. You should run far away from me and never look back. Is that what you want? No. The word was torn from him, raw and honest. God help me, no. His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed, every nerve ending alive with anticipation. We shouldn't, he murmured, even as he drew closer. Probably not, she agreed. Their lips were inches apart when the sound of footsteps on gravel shattered the moment. They sprang apart as Marco rounded the corner, his expression carefully blank but his eyes missing nothing. "Father. Naomi." His voice was pleasant, controlled. "The caterers need a final decision on the menu. I've been looking everywhere for you." "Of course." Dominic's composure snapped back into place so quickly it was almost frightening. "We were just discussing the garden arrangements." Naomi had some thoughts on the floral displays. "I'm sure she did." Marco's gaze lingered on Naomi for a beat too long. "Shall we?" As they walked back to the house, Naomi felt the weight of Marco's attention like a hand pressed against her spine. He knew. Or at least he suspected. And from the cold calculation in his eyes, she understood that. Dominic's son was not a man who tolerated threats to his position, or his inheritance. She had just become a target. The discovery happened by accident. 3 days before the gala, Naomi was searching for aspirin in Mrs. Hargrove's office when she stumbled upon a locked drawer she had never noticed before. Curiosity, that same dangerous curiosity that had started all of this, compelled her to find the key. Hidden predictably beneath a potted plant. Inside the drawer was a file labeled, Carter J. Her hands trembling, she opened it. What she found made her blood run cold. Photographs. Dozens of them. Her father, Jonathan Carter, standing beside Dominic Valentino at various events spanning years. Documents showing her father had been the Valentino family's accountant, their primary financial manager, from 1990 until 2004. Bank records. Offshore accounts. Transaction histories that spoke of money laundering on a massive scale. And then, buried at the bottom, a newspaper clipping that stopped her heart entirely. Local accountant disappears amid mob investigation. Jonathan Carter, 38, vanished 3 days before he was scheduled to testify before a federal grand jury investigating organized crime in Chicago. Sources say Carter had agreed to turn state's evidence against the Valentino crime family in exchange for immunity and witness protection for himself and his family. His wife, Gloria Carter, and 2 children were approached for relocation but ultimately declined, claiming no knowledge of Mr. Carter's activities. The family has not been seen in public since the disappearance. Federal investigators suspect foul play but have been unable to locate Carter's body or definitively prove his death. Naomi's vision blurred. Her father hadn't abandoned them. He had been taken, or killed, because he tried to do the right thing. He had tried to bring down the Valentino family, and he had paid for it with his life. And Dominic, the man she had begun to fall for, the man whose touch made her forget every reason she should stay away, had almost certainly ordered his death. The file slipped from her numb fingers, paper scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God, no." She didn't hear the door open behind her. Didn't sense the presence until a cold voice spoke directly into her ear. "Well, well. The prodigal daughter finally finds what she's been looking for." Naomi spun around to find Marco standing in the doorway, a smile playing on his lips that didn't reach his eyes. "I wondered how long it would take," he said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. "I have to admit, you're more patient than I expected. Most people would have cracked weeks ago." "You knew." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You knew who I was from the beginning." "Of course I knew. Unlike my father, I actually read the background checks." He moved closer, and she backed away until she hit the desk. Jonathan Carter's daughter, all grown up and playing nurse to the man who destroyed her family. It's poetic, really. Almost romantic. "Did he kill my father?" Marco's smile widened. "That's the question, isn't it? The one that's been eating you alive." He leaned in close, his breath hot against her ear. "Here's what I'll tell you, Naomi. My father is many things, a murderer, a thief, a liar, but he's also a man who keeps secrets. Even from me." He pulled back, his eyes glittering. "The truth about Jonathan Carter is buried somewhere in this house. Find it, and you'll have your answer." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to find it." His expression hardened. "I want you to see who my father really is. I want you to understand that whatever pretty fantasy you've been building in your head, the reformed gangster, the lonely widower, the man who just needs the right woman to save him, it's a lie. He is a monster, Naomi. And monsters don't change. They just learn to hide their teeth." He turned and walked toward the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. "The gala is in 3 days. I suggest you decide before then what you're going to do with the truth." A final, chilling smile. "Choose wisely." The door closed behind him, and Naomi sank to the floor, surrounded by the scattered evidence of her father's betrayal and death. Her heart shattered into pieces she didn't know how to reassemble. Everything she thought she knew was a lie. And the man she had begun to love might be the man who murdered her father. Have you ever discovered something that completely changed how you saw someone you cared about? How did you handle the collision between love and truth? Share your story in the comments below. The night of the gala arrived wrapped in winter frost and dangerous possibilities. Naomi stood before the mirror in her suite, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The emerald gown Dominic had sent, without a note, without explanation, clung to her curves like it had been designed for her body alone. Her hair was swept up in an elegant twist, and diamond earrings she had tried to refuse sparkled at her lobes. She looked like she belonged in his world. The thought made her sick. For 3 days, she had moved through the estate like a ghost, smiling when expected, speaking when necessary, all while the evidence of her father's fate burned a hole in her consciousness. She had hidden the file in her room, reading it over and over until every word was seared into her memory. Jonathan Carter had been a whistleblower. A man who had seen the darkness of the Valentino Empire and chosen to stand against it. And for that courage he had been erased. But one question haunted her above all others. Had Dominic personally ordered the hit? Or was there more to the story than the scattered documents revealed? Mako's words echoed in her mind. The truth about Jonathan Carter is buried somewhere in this house. Tonight, while the gala commanded everyone's attention, she would find it. The ballroom of the Valentino estate had been transformed into a winter wonderland. Crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light across ice sculptures and silver decorations. A string quartet playing softly in the corner. Chicago's elite mingling in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. It was beautiful and obscene. A celebration of wealth built on foundations Naomi could no longer ignore. Dominic found her the moment she descended the staircase. He stood at the bottom, resplendent in a black tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and silver-touched hair. When his eyes found hers, something in his expression cracked open. Wonder, longing, and a vulnerability that made her treacherous heart ache despite everything. "You are." He paused, seemingly at a loss for words. "Naomi, you are extraordinary." She wanted to hate him. She needed to hate him. But when he extended his hand and she placed her fingers in his palm, all she felt was the electric connection that had been building between them for weeks. "Dance with me," he murmured. It wasn't a question. She let him lead her to the floor. They moved together like they had been dancing their entire lives. His hand warm at the small of her back, her head close enough to rest on his shoulder if she allowed herself. Around them, guests whispered and stared. But Dominic seemed oblivious to everything except her. "You've been distant," he said quietly, his lips close to her ear. "Since that night in the garden, I've felt you pulling away. I've had a lot on my mind. Tell me. Tell you that I found proof you might have murdered my father? Tell you that every time you touch me, I feel like I'm betraying his memory?" "It's nothing," she lied. "Just stress about the event." Dominic pulled back slightly, searching her face with those dark eyes that saw too much. "You're lying to me, Naomi. You've never lied to me before." Before she could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A group of men had arrived, sharp-faced, cold-eyed, radiating menace despite their expensive suits. At their center stood a man in his 60s with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. Dominic's entire body went rigid. "Who is that?" Naomi whispered. "Victor Morelli." The name came out like poison. Head of the Morelli family. Our greatest rival. His arm tightened around her waist. "Stay close to me." Victor Morelli moved through the crowd like a shark through still water, guests parting instinctively before him. When he reached Dominic, his smile widened into something predatory. "Dominic, what a lovely event. So generous of you to open your home to the community." His eyes slid to Naomi, and she felt exposed, examined, calculated. "And who is this vision?" "My private medical consultant," Dominic said flatly. "She's not your concern. Everything in your orbit is my concern, old friend." Victor's gaze lingered on Naomi with unsettling intensity. "We should talk. Privately. There are matters that require discussion." "This is neither the time nor the place." "Make it the time." The pleasantry dropped from Victor's voice like a discarded mask. "Unless you want our discussion to happen here, in front of all these respectable citizens. I'm sure they'd love to hear about certain events from 20 years ago. Certain disappearances." Naomi's blood turned to ice. "He knows. He knows about my father." Dominic's jaw tightened, but he nodded once. "My study. 10 minutes. I look forward to it." Victor's smile returned, colder than before. He turned to leave, then paused, glancing back at Naomi. "Lovely to meet you, Miss Carter. Your father would be so proud of how far you've come." He vanished into the crowd before she could react. Dominic's hand gripped her arm, his face pale. "Naomi. He knew my father." Her voice shook. "How did he know my father?" "Not here." Dominic pulled her through a side door, down a corridor, into a small antechamber away from prying eyes. He closed the door and turned to face her, his expression torn between fear and resignation. "I was going to tell you," he said. "I was trying to find the right time, the right words." "Tell me what?" "That you killed him." The accusation exploded from her, weeks of suppressed anguish finally breaking free. "I found the file, Dominic. I know he was your accountant. I know he was going to testify against you. I know he disappeared 3 days before the trial." Dominic closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they glistened with unshed tears. "Yes, all of that is true." "So you killed him?" "No." The word was firm, absolute. "I did not kill your father, Naomi. I swear on Elena's grave. I did not kill Jonathan Carter." "Then who did?" A long, terrible silence. Then, "Victor Morelli." The room tilted. Naomi grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. "What?" Your father came to me before the trial. He was terrified, not of me, but of what testifying would mean for his family. For you. Dominic's voice cracked. He begged me to help him disappear. To fake his death and get him somewhere safe. Somewhere Victor couldn't reach him. Victor? Why would Victor? Because your father wasn't just my accountant, Naomi. He was also laundering money for the Morellis. Playing both sides, skimming from both families. When he decided to testify, he became a liability to everyone. Dominic stepped closer, his hands reaching for hers. I agreed to help him. I arranged safe passage, new documents, everything. But Victor found out. His men intercepted your father before my people could reach him. Tears streamed down Naomi's face. So he's dead. Victor killed him. Another pause. Longer this time. Heavier. I don't know, Dominic admitted. Victor claimed he killed him, but he never produced a body. For 20 years, I've wondered if your father somehow escaped, if he's out there somewhere, alive. His hands finally found hers, gripping tight. When I learned who you were, I wanted to tell you everything. But how do you tell someone that their father might be alive, when you have no proof? How do you give someone hope that might destroy them if it's false? Naomi pulled her hands free, her mind reeling. Her father might be alive. All these years of grief, of abandonment, of believing he had chosen to leave, and he might have been running for his life. I need air, she gasped. I can't. She fled from the room before Dominic could stop her. The garden was empty, the winter cold biting through her thin gown, but Naomi didn't care. She stood among the frozen roses, her breath clouding in the darkness, trying to piece together a reality that had shattered beyond recognition. Touching, isn't it? She spun to find Victor Morelli emerging from the shadows, his guards hanging back at a respectful distance. The way he looks at you. The way he's clearly fallen for Jonathan Carter's daughter, of all people. Victor chuckled. Life does have a sense of humor. Stay away from me. Oh, I intend to. I have no quarrel with you, Miss Carter. You're merely a pawn in a much larger game. He moved closer, and she backed away instinctively. But I thought you deserved to know the truth. The whole truth. Not the sanitized version Dominic surely fed you. You killed my father. Did I? Victor's smile was enigmatic. That's certainly what I wanted everyone to believe. Fear is currency in our world, and the story of what happens to traitors is worth more than gold. He tilted his head. But the truth is far more interesting. What are you saying? I'm saying that your father was smarter than anyone gave him credit for. I'm saying that the man we intercepted that night wasn't Jonathan Carter at all. Just a very convincing decoy. Victor's eyes glittered. Your father escaped, Miss Carter. And for 20 years, I've been searching for him. Naomi's heart stopped. He's alive. I believe so. And I believe Dominic knows exactly where he is. Victor leaned in close. The question is, will you help me find him? Or will you let your misguided feelings for a murderer keep you from reuniting with your own father? Dominic is not. Not a murderer? Please. Victor laughed. Ask him about the Castellano massacre. Ask him about the 14 men he executed personally to secure his position. Ask him how many bodies are buried beneath the very ground you're standing on. He straightened, adjusting his cuffs. I'll give you time to think. But not too much time. My patience has limits. He disappeared into the darkness, leaving Naomi alone with questions that multiplied like cancer. Her father was alive. Dominic might know where he was. And the man she had begun to love had secrets darker than she had ever imagined. The sound of footsteps made her turn. Dominic emerged from the house, his face etched with worry. "Naomi, thank God. When you ran, I thought." He stopped, reading something in her expression. "What did Victor tell you?" She looked at him. This man who had shown her tenderness, who had opened his scarred heart to her, who had made her believe in impossible things. "Is my father alive, Dominic?" His silence was answer enough. "Where is he?" More silence. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. "I can't tell you." "Can't? Or won't?" "Both." His voice broke. "If I tell you, Victor will find out. And if Victor finds your father, he will kill him. For real this time. The only thing keeping Jonathan alive is the fact that no one knows where he is. Not Victor. Not my own people." He reached for her. "Please, Naomi. You have to trust me." She stepped back from his touch, her heart shattering. "Trust you? You've been lying to me since the moment we met. Everything, the job, the money, the way you looked at me. Was it all just to keep me close? To control what I knew?" "No." The word was fierce, desperate. "What I feel for you is real. It's the most real thing I've felt since Elena died. I love you, Naomi. I love you, and I'm terrified that the truth will destroy us." The confession hung between them, raw and devastating. "I need time," she whispered. "I need to think." She walked past him toward the house, and this time he let her go. Behind her, Dominic Valentino stood alone in his frozen garden, watching the woman he loved walk away, knowing that the secrets he had kept to protect her might have cost him everything. 3 days after the gala, Naomi sat in her childhood bedroom at her mother's house, surrounded by memories of a life that now felt like fiction. She had left the Valentino estate without saying goodbye, packed her bags while Dominic was in meetings, slipped out through the service entrance, and caught a cab back to the south side. Her phone had buzzed relentlessly for the first 24 hours, Dominic's number appearing again and again, until she finally turned it off and buried it in a drawer. Her mother knew something was wrong. Gloria Carter had survived too much to miss the signs of heartbreak in her daughter's eyes. But she didn't push, didn't pry. She simply made tea, sat beside Naomi on the worn couch, and waited. "Mama," Naomi finally said, her voice cracked and hollow, "did you know? About Daddy? About what he really did?" Gloria's hands stilled around her teacup. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, slowly, "I knew he was involved with dangerous people. I knew he was trying to get out." Her eyes, so like Naomi's own, filled with old grief. "The night he disappeared, he called me. Said he loved us, said he was sorry. Said we might not see him for a while but that he would find his way back to us." A tear slipped down her weathered cheek. "I never heard from him again." "He might be alive, Mama." Gloria's breath caught. "What?" Naomi told her everything. Dominic, the file, Victor Morelli, the revelation that Jonathan might have escaped. When she finished, her mother was trembling. "All these years," Gloria whispered. "All these years I thought he was dead. I mourned him. She broke off, pressing a hand to her mouth. "I'm going to find him," Naomi said. "I don't know how yet, but I'm going to bring him home." The next morning, Marco Valentino was waiting on her mother's porch. "Touching reunion," he said, blocking her path when she tried to pass. "Mother and daughter. processing trauma together. Very Lifetime movie. Get out of my way, Marco. Not until you hear what I have to say. His expression was harder than she had ever seen it, stripped of charm and pretense. Victor Morelli has put a price on your head. $50,000 to whoever delivers you to him alive. Naomi's blood chilled. Why? Because you're leveraged. Against my father, against your own father. Whoever surfaces first. Marco stepped closer. You're not safe here. You're not safe anywhere Victor can reach. The only person with the resources to protect you is the man you ran away from. I don't need Dominic's protection. Yes, you do. Marco's voice softened unexpectedly. Look, I know I've been difficult. I was jealous, angry, and threatened by what you represent. But my father loves you, Naomi. Actually loves you, in a way I haven't seen since my mother died. He looked away. And despite everything, I don't want to watch him lose someone else. Before Naomi could respond, the sound of screeching tires cut through the morning air. A black SUV rounded the corner, windows rolling down to reveal armed men. Get inside. Marco shoved her toward the door as gunfire erupted. Glass shattered. Her mother screamed. Naomi hit the floor, crawling toward Gloria, her mind blank with terror. Marco returned fire from the doorway, shouting into his phone for backup. The attack lasted less than 2 minutes, but it felt like hours. When the SUV finally sped away, Naomi found herself clutching her mother in a corner of the kitchen, both of them shaking uncontrollably. Marco stood in the destroyed living room, blood seeping from a graze on his arm, his face grim. Still think you don't need protection? Naomi looked at her mother, this woman who had sacrificed everything, who had raised 2 children alone, who deserved peace instead of bullets and terror. Take us to Dominic, she said. Dominic was waiting in the courtyard when Marco's car pulled through the gates. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Shirt wrinkled, jaw shadowed with stubble, eyes haunted with worry. When Naomi stepped out of the vehicle, he moved toward her like a man approaching holy ground, afraid to believe she was real. You're hurt, he said, his gaze catching the small cuts on her arms from the shattered glass. I'm fine. My mother is being taken to the secure wing. My personal physician will attend to her. His hands hovered at his sides, desperate to touch her but uncertain of his welcome. Naomi, I'm so sorry. I should have anticipated Victor's move. I should have. Stop. She held up a hand. We don't have time for apologies. Victor wants me because he thinks I can lead him to my father. Can I? The question hung between them, sharp as a blade. Dominic closed his eyes. When he opened them, a decision had been made. Yes. Then tell me where he is. It's not that simple. Your father isn't hiding in some remote location. He's been here, Naomi. Dominic's voice dropped. In Chicago. For the last 15 years. The world tilted. What? After he escaped Victor's men, he came to me. Begged me to hide him somewhere no one would think to look. Dominic led her inside, through corridors she had walked dozens of times, until they reached a door she had never noticed, hidden behind a bookshelf in his private study. Behind the door was a staircase leading down. He's been living in a secured apartment beneath the estate. New identity, no outside contact, completely off the grid. Dominic paused on the stairs, turning to face her. He wanted to reach out to you and your mother so many times. I wouldn't let him. Every contact was a risk, a thread Victor could pull to unravel everything. Naomi's heart pounded so violently she thought it might break her ribs. You kept my father prisoner for 15 years? I kept him alive. Dominic's voice cracked. And it cost me everything. My marriage suffered because Elena never understood why I was so protective of this secret. My relationship with Marco fractured because I couldn't explain my absences. He reached for her hand, and this time, she let him take it. I did it because your father saved my life once, long before you were born. He found a discrepancy in my father's books, a betrayal that would have gotten me killed, and he warned me. I owed him a debt I could never repay. They reached the bottom of the stairs. A heavy steel door stood before them, a keypad glowing softly in the dim light. Are you ready? Dominic asked. Naomi wasn't sure she would ever be ready, but she nodded anyway. Dominic entered the code. The door swung open. And there, standing in a modest living room with tears streaming down his face, was Jonathan Carter. Baby girl, he whispered. My beautiful baby girl. Naomi crossed the room in 3 steps and fell into her father's arms. The reunion was everything and nothing like she had imagined. Jonathan was older, grayer, diminished by years of isolation, but his eyes were the same warm brown she remembered from childhood, and his embrace still felt like safety. I wanted to come back, he said, holding her face in his hands. Every single day, I wanted to walk out that door and find you. But Dominic was right. Victor has eyes everywhere. If I surfaced, he would have killed me, and then come for you and your mother. Mama thinks you abandoned us. I know. His voice broke. That was the hardest part. Knowing you believed I chose to leave. Knowing I couldn't explain. Naomi wiped her tears and turned to Dominic, who stood in the doorway, watching with an expression of profound vulnerability. You should have told me, she said. From the beginning. Would you have believed me? Would you have trusted me? He shook his head. You needed to find the truth yourself. You needed to choose whether to hate me or understand. I don't hate you. The admission cost her something, but it was true. I don't understand everything yet. But I don't hate you. Something like hope flickered in Dominic's eyes. Victor won't stop, Jonathan said, his voice hardening. As long as I'm alive, he'll keep hunting. Keep threatening the people I love. Then we end it, Naomi said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. We stop running, stop hiding. We will take the fight to him. Father and protector exchanged glances. Then Dominic nodded slowly. Together, he said. For the first time since the nightmare began, Naomi felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. The plan was dangerous, audacious, and utterly insane. Jonathan would surface publicly, a ghost returned from the dead, drawing Victor's attention while Dominic's men moved into position. The FBI, quietly contacted through channels Jonathan had maintained from his whistleblower days, would be waiting to catch Victor in the act of attempted murder. 20 years of evidence, carefully preserved, would finally bring the Morelli empire crashing down. But Victor Morelli hadn't survived 6 decades in the underworld by being predictable. The meeting was set for an abandoned warehouse on the waterfront, neutral territory, or so they claimed. Naomi insisted on being there, despite Dominic's desperate objections. You're not a soldier, he argued, gripping her shoulders. You're not trained for this. I'm not hiding while my father risks his life. She met his eyes with fierce determination. I spent 20 years believing he abandoned me. I won't lose him again. Dominic stared at her for a long moment, a war raging behind his eyes. Then he pulled her close, crushing her against his chest. "If anything happens to you," he murmured into her hair, "I will burn this city to the ground." "Nothing's going to happen." She pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. "We're going to win. And then you're going to take me to dinner like a normal person." Despite everything, he laughed. A broken, beautiful sound. "I haven't been normal in 40 years. Then we'll figure it out together." She kissed him. It was desperate, fierce, a promise and a prayer intertwined. When they finally broke apart, his eyes were bright with emotion. "Together," he echoed. The warehouse smelled of rust and decay, shadows pooling in corners where the flickering overhead lights couldn't reach. Naomi stood with Marco and a handful of Dominic's most trusted men, hidden behind shipping containers while her father walked into the open space alone. Victor Morelli was already waiting. "Jonathan Carter." Victor's voice echoed through the cavernous space. "The man who wouldn't stay dead. I have to admit I'm impressed." "I'm not here to impress you, Victor. I'm here to end this." "End this?" Victor laughed. "You're a ghost with no power, no resources, no leverage. What exactly do you think you're going to end?" "Your freedom." Jonathan's voice carried clearly. "The FBI has everything. Account numbers, transaction records, testimony. By morning, federal agents will be at your door." Victor's expression flickered, but he recovered quickly. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Jonathan smiled grimly. "You spent 20 years hunting a dead man while I spent 20 years building a case. Every corrupt official you bribed, every business you extorted, every body you buried. I have documentation on all of it." For the first time, genuine fear crossed Victor's face. Then it hardened into rage. "Kill him," he ordered. Gunfire erupted. Naomi's heart seized as her father dove for cover, bullets sparking off concrete where he had stood. Dominic's men engaged Victor's soldiers, the warehouse transforming into chaos of muzzle flashes and shouted commands. Through the mayhem, she saw Victor slipping toward a back exit, a gun in his hand and murder in his eyes. He was heading for her father. She didn't think so. She ran. "Naomi Eno." Dominic's voice cut through the gunfire, but she was already moving, sprinting across the warehouse floor with a recklessness that bordered on suicidal. Victor reached Jonathan first, pressing his gun to her father's temple just as Naomi emerged from the shadows. "Stop right there," Victor snarled. "One more step and I paint the floor with his brains." Naomi froze, her chest heaving, her mind racing. "Let him go, Victor. It's over. The FBI is already moving on your organization." "Then I have nothing to lose, do I?" His finger tightened on the trigger. "You have your life." Dominic's voice came from behind Victor, cold and deadly. He had circled around, his own weapon aimed at the back of Victor's head. "Drop the gun, old friend. Or I'll do what I should have done 20 years ago." Victor's jaw clenched. For an eternal moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Victor lowered his weapon. FBI agents swarmed the warehouse seconds later, surrounding Victor's remaining men and taking them into custody. Victor Morelli, head of one of Chicago's most powerful crime families, was handcuffed and led away, his empire crumbling with every step. Naomi ran to her father, throwing her arms around him as tears streamed down her face. "It's over," Jonathan whispered, holding her tight. "It's finally over." Across the warehouse, Dominic watched them embrace, his expression soft with something that looked like peace. When Naomi lifted her head and met his eyes, she saw the question there. The uncertainty of a man who had spent his whole life in darkness, wondering if he deserved to step into the light. She extended her hand toward him. He crossed the distance and took it. 6 months later, spring arrived in Chicago like a promise kept. The Carter family sat together on the porch of Gloria's house, newly renovated, courtesy of a man who insisted it wasn't charity but investment in his future in-laws. Jonathan held his wife's hand, their fingers intertwined with the ease of lovers who had never truly been apart. Marcus stood at the grill, arguing good-naturedly with Marco about the proper way to season ribs, their unlikely friendship one of the many surprises the past months had delivered. And Naomi stood in the garden, watching the family she had pieced back together from fragments and faith. "You're thinking too loud." She smiled as Dominic's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "I'm thinking about how strange life is. 6 months ago, I was a waitress with a mountain of debt and a broken family. Now you're a nursing student with a finished degree on the horizon, a reunited family, and a devastatingly handsome boyfriend who happens to adore you." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Strange indeed." She turned in his arms, studying the face that had become her favorite landscape. The lines around his eyes seemed softer now, the weight he carried lighter. He had stepped back from the darker aspects of his business, transitioning the Valentino empire toward legitimacy with Marco's eager assistance. It wasn't a complete transformation. Some shadows couldn't be erased overnight, but it was a beginning. "I love you," she said. "Have I mentioned that today?" "Only 4 times. I was starting to worry." She laughed, and he caught the sound with a kiss. Tender, unhurried, full of tomorrow. "Get a room," Marcus hollered from the grill, and Marco wolf whistled obnoxiously. Naomi pulled back, her cheeks warm, her heart full. "Your son is a terrible influence on my brother. My son is finally learning how to be part of a family. I blame you entirely." They joined the others as the afternoon sun stretched golden across the yard. Gloria had made her famous sweet potato pie, and Jonathan couldn't stop touching his wife. Her hand, her shoulder, her cheek, as if confirming she was real. 20 years of separation, and they were learning each other again, filling the gaps with patience and grace. After dinner, Dominic stood and cleared his throat, suddenly nervous in a way Naomi had never seen. "I have something to say." He reached into his pocket. "I've spent most of my life building an empire I thought would make me powerful. I was wrong. Power isn't money or influence or fear." His eyes found Naomi's. "Power is having someone look at you, knowing all your sins, all your darkness, and choosing to stay anyway." He lowered himself to one knee. Gloria gasped. Marcus dropped his fork. Jonathan's eyes glistened with tears. "Naomi Carter, you saved my life in more ways than you'll ever know. You gave me a reason to breathe, to hope, to believe that even a man like me deserves a second chance." He opened the velvet box, revealing a ring that sparkled like captured starlight. "Will you marry me?" The world held its breath. Naomi thought of the journey that had brought her here, a dying man on a restaurant floor, a choice made in an instant, a path that wound through secrets and danger and heartbreak. She thought of her father, restored to her. Her mother, radiant with joy. Her brother, finally at peace. She thought of Dominic, flawed, scarred, trying so hard to become the man she already saw in him. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, laughing through tears. "Yes, you impossible man. Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her as the family erupted in cheers. Jonathan shook Dominic's hand with a grip that conveyed more than words ever could. Gloria embraced her future son-in-law, whispering something that made him blink rapidly. Marcus and Marco were already debating who would be best man. Later, as twilight painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, Naomi stood with Dominic at the edge of the garden, looking out at the family gathered on the porch. "I never thought I'd have this," he admitted quietly. "A family. A future. You. Life surprises us." She leaned into him. "The night you walked into that restaurant, I thought you were just another powerful man who saw me as invisible. I never imagined you'd become my whole world." "You were never invisible, Naomi. I was just too blind to see." He turned her to face him, his eyes shining with love and wonder. "Thank you for saving me. In every way a person can be saved." She kissed him softly, a seal on the promise they had made. Behind them, laughter rose from the porch. Her father's deep rumble, her mother's musical joy, her brother's teasing shouts. The sounds of a family healed, a future bright, a love story written against impossible odds. Naomi Carter had walked into darkness to save a stranger's life. And in doing so, she had found her way home. What would you risk for a second chance at love and family? Sometimes the most unexpected moments lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story touched your heart, make sure to like and subscribe for more.